The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the small-town bar as Jake Martinez nursed his beer, trying to forget another day of dead-end job interviews. 3 months since he'd gotten out of the Navy, and civilian life felt like wearing boots on the wrong feet. Everything was backwards, nothing made sense, and nobody seemed to understand what he was going through. The Anchor Tavern wasn't much to look at: cracked vinyl stools, a pool table with more holes than felt, and a jukebox that only played country music from the 1990s. But it was quiet, dark, and the bartender didn't ask questions. That made it perfect for Jake's current mission, drinking away his problems one beer at a time. "Another round?" asked Tommy, the heavy-set bartender with arms covered in faded tattoos. Jake nodded, sliding his empty bottle across the scarred wooden bar. "Keep 'em coming." He'd been a Navy SEAL for 8 years, served 3 tours overseas, completed missions that most people couldn't imagine in their worst nightmares. But none of that mattered in the real world. Employers saw his military record and either assumed he was damaged goods or figured he'd quit the first time someone raised their voice at him. Neither assumption was correct, but try explaining that in a 15-minute interview. The door chimed as 3 men walked in, their loud voices cutting through the quiet atmosphere. Jake glanced up from his beer and immediately recognized the type: local tough guys looking for trouble. They wore matching leather jackets despite the warm weather, gold chains catching the dim light, and that particular swagger that screamed, "We own this place." Tommy, the largest one, called out, slapping his hand on the bar hard enough to make the bottles rattle. "Set us up with shots of your best whiskey. We're celebrating." Tommy's face went pale, but he reached for the bottle. "Coming right up, Vince." Jake turned back to his beer, hoping to avoid attention. He'd had enough confrontation for one lifetime and just wanted to drink in peace. But peace wasn't on the menu tonight. "Hey you," Vince's voice boomed across the bar. "Military boy." "Yeah, I'm talking to you." Jake's shoulders tensed, but he didn't turn around. "Just having a drink, man. Not looking for trouble." Vince laughed, a harsh sound that made Tommy flinch. "Trouble? Who said anything about trouble? I just want to know what branch of the Boy Scouts you served in." The other 2 men laughed like it was the funniest joke they'd ever heard. Jake could feel their eyes on his back, could sense them moving closer. Every instinct told him to walk away, but something deep inside started to burn. "Navy," Jake replied quietly, still facing forward. "Navy." Vince slapped the bar again. "Hear that, boys? We got ourselves a sailor. Bet you spent most of your time swabbing decks and staying nice and safe on some big ship, huh?" Jake's jaw tightened. He'd heard every variation of this conversation over the years. People who'd never served always had the loudest opinions about military service. But tonight, after months of rejection and frustration, their ignorance hit different. "Something like that," he said, hoping they'd get bored and move on. Instead, Vince moved closer, his breath reeking of cheap cologne and expensive whiskey. "You know what I think? I think you military boys are all the same. Bunch of government puppets who can't think for themselves. Take away your fancy toys and uniforms, and you're just scared little boys playing dress-up." The bar went dead silent. Even the jukebox seemed to lower its volume. Tommy stopped wiping glasses and stared at the confrontation developing in front of him. The other patrons, 2 old-timers playing chess in the corner and a young couple sharing nachos, all turned to watch. Jake slowly set down his beer and turned to face Vince. The man was bigger than he'd looked from behind, probably 6'4" and close to 300 pounds. His friends flanked him on either side, forming a wall of leather and attitude. "I'm not looking for a fight," Jake said calmly. "I just want to finish my beer and go home." Vince grinned, showing teeth stained yellow from too much tobacco. "Who said anything about fighting? I'm just making conversation. Unless you're too scared to talk to real men who actually work for a living instead of living off government handouts." The words hit Jake like physical blows. Government handouts. As if the blood, sweat, and nightmares he'd earned overseas were some kind of charity. As if watching good men die while protecting ungrateful people like Vince was easy money. "You don't know what you're talking about," Jake said, his voice steady but carrying an edge that made smart people step back. Vince wasn't smart people. Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about, he said, jabbing a thick finger at Jake's chest. My tax dollars paid for your little vacation overseas. And now you're back here, probably collecting disability for some made-up injury, drinking away our money. Jake looked down at the finger poking his chest, then back up at Vince's face. Something cold settled in his stomach, the same feeling he'd gotten before every dangerous mission. Time seemed to slow down as his training kicked in, reading the room, calculating distances, identifying threats and escape routes. Take your finger off me, Jake said quietly. Vince laughed and poked harder. Or what? You gonna cry to your commanding officer? The jab was meant to be humiliating, but Vince had no idea who he was dealing with. Jake Martinez hadn't just served in the Navy, he'd been a member of one of the most elite fighting forces in the world. He'd been through training that broke grown men, fought in places where weakness meant death, and learned skills that most people couldn't imagine. But right now, he just looked like another veteran down on his luck, drinking alone in a dive bar. That perception was about to change dramatically. Last warning, Jake said, his voice carrying the same tone he'd used when talking to terrorists who thought they were tough. Step back. Vince's grin widened. He was enjoying this, feeding off what he thought was Jake's fear. His friends moved closer, forming a tighter circle. The message was clear, this was 3 against 1, and they liked those odds. Make me, sailor boy. What happened next took less than 3 seconds, but, for everyone watching, it felt like slow motion. Jake's left hand moved first, grabbing Vince's extended finger and twisting it backward at an angle that human fingers weren't meant to bend. The big man's face went from arrogant confidence to shocked pain as Jake used the finger like a steering wheel, turning Vince's entire body and driving him to his knees. Before Vince's friends could react, Jake's right elbow struck the nearest one in the solar plexus, dropping him to the floor gasping for air. The third man started to reach into his jacket, but Jake's boot caught him in the knee with surgical precision, buckling his leg and sending him crashing into a table. In the span of a few heartbeats, 3 large men who'd walked into the bar looking for easy prey were on the ground, moaning in pain. Jake stood over them, not even breathing hard, still holding Vince's finger in a position that kept the big man helpless on his knees. The bar was dead silent except for the groaning of the defeated men and the soft country music still playing from the jukebox. Here's the thing, Jake said conversationally, as if he was discussing the weather. I didn't want any trouble tonight. I came here to drink my beer and mind my own business. But you couldn't let that happen. Vince tried to speak, but the pain in his finger made coherent words impossible. See, you made a mistake, Jake continued, increasing the pressure slightly and making Vince whimper. You assumed that because I wasn't looking for a fight, I couldn't handle one. You thought military training was just marching around and following orders. He looked around the bar, making eye contact with everyone watching. Let me educate you about something. The United States Navy SEALs are the most elite special operations force in the world. We don't train to march in parades or look pretty in uniforms. We train to kill people and break things in ways that keep you safe at night. The young couple at the table looked terrified. The old-timers playing chess had stopped their game entirely. Tommy stood frozen behind the bar, a glass still in his hands. Every single day for 8 years, I trained with weapons, explosives, and hand-to-hand combat techniques that most people have never heard of, Jake explained in the same calm voice. I learned to survive in environments that would kill regular people. I fought enemies who wanted to cut my head off and post the video online. He adjusted his grip on Vince's finger, making the big man cry out. And you thought you could intimidate me with leather jackets and attitude? The friend who'd been hit in the knee was trying to crawl toward the door. Jake noticed but didn't stop him. One less problem to deal with. Now, here's what's going to happen, Jake said to Vince. I'm going to let go of your finger, and you and your friends are going to walk out of here. You're going to find a new bar to hang out in, because this one is off limits to you now. And if I hear that you've been bothering Tommy or any of his customers, we're going to have another conversation. Except next time, I won't be nearly as gentle. He released Vince's finger and stepped back. The big man clutched his hand to his chest, tears streaming down his face. His tough guy image had evaporated completely, replaced by the reality of what happened when amateur bullies met professional warriors. "Get out," Jake said simply. Vince struggled to his feet, helped his gasping friend stand up, and they stumbled toward the door. The third man was already outside, probably calling for backup or an ambulance. Jake watched them go, then turned back to the bar as if nothing had happened. "Sorry about the mess," he told Tommy, pulling out his wallet to leave money for his drinks. Tommy shook his head, still processing what he'd witnessed. "Drinks around the house, man. Those guys have been causing trouble here for months. I was getting ready to call the police when they walked in." Jake nodded and put his wallet away. "They shouldn't bother you anymore. But, if they do, call me." He wrote his phone number on a napkin and slid it across the bar. As he turned to leave, the old man from the chess game spoke up. "Son, I was in Korea back in the 50s. Thought I'd seen some tough soldiers." He shook his head slowly. "But, what you just did, that was something else entirely." Jake paused at the door. "Just doing what I was trained for, sir." Outside, the cool night air felt good against his skin. For the first time in months, Jake felt like himself again. Not a struggling veteran looking for work, not a broken soldier drowning his problems in alcohol, but a SEAL who'd temporarily forgotten what he was capable of. His phone buzzed with a text message. "Unknown number. Heard you had some excitement at the Anchor tonight. Meet me at Denny's on Main Street. We need to talk." Marcus Jake stared at the message, his blood running cold. Nobody in this small town knew his military background except what little he'd mentioned on job applications. And nobody outside his old unit called him by his first name without using his rank. Marcus. The name meant something, but he couldn't quite place it. Something important, something dangerous. Another text arrived, "Don't make me come looking for you." 30 minutes. Jake's training kicked in automatically. Someone was watching him, had been watching him long enough to know his movements and his current situation. Someone with enough intelligence assets to know about a bar fight within hours of it happening. He looked around the parking lot, noting the positions of cars and streetlights, identifying potential threats and escape routes. The paranoia that had kept him alive overseas was flooding back, and with it came clarity. This wasn't over. The bar fight wasn't the end of his story, it was just the beginning. As Jake walked toward his motorcycle, he couldn't shake the feeling that his quiet civilian life was about to get very complicated. And, somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice whispered that maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. The bike roared to life, cutting through the night air as Jake headed toward what he suspected would be a conversation that changed everything. 3 months of trying to fit into civilian life, and now it seemed like his past was catching up with him whether he wanted it to or not. Behind him, the Anchor Tavern was returning to its normal quiet atmosphere. But the story of what happened there would spread quickly through the small town, growing with each telling. By morning, Jake Martinez would no longer be just another unemployed veteran drinking away his problems. He would be the man who'd proven that some fights were over before they even began. Denny's at midnight looked like a scene from a movie about broken dreams. Fluorescent lights buzzed over empty booths, while a tired waitress refilled coffee cups for truckers and insomniacs. Jake parked his motorcycle under a street lamp and scanned the parking lot before going inside. Old habits from dangerous places died hard. He spotted Marcus immediately, corner booth, back to the wall, clear view of all entrances. The man looked exactly like what he was, former military trying to blend into civilian clothes but failing completely. His posture was too straight, his eyes too alert, and his haircut too precise for someone who'd been out of the service long enough to grow comfortable. "Jake Martinez," Marcus said as Jake slid into the opposite seat. "Been a long time." Jake studied the man's face, searching his memory for the connection. Marcus looked to be in his early 40s, lean build, weathered skin, and eyes that had seen too much. There was something familiar about him, but the context was wrong. "Do I know you?" Jake asked carefully. Marcus smiled without warmth.
Afghanistan, 2018. Operation Crimson Dawn.
You pulled my team out of a Taliban ambush in the Hindu Kush Mountains.
The memory hit Jake like a physical blow.
3 years ago, his SEAL team had been tasked with extracting a CIA intelligence unit that had gone dark during a reconnaissance mission. They'd found Marcus and 2 other agents pinned down in a cave system, surrounded by hostile forces and running low on ammunition. "You're CIA," Jake said, pieces falling into place.
"Was CIA," Marcus corrected.
"Now I work for people who pay better and ask fewer questions." The waitress approached their table with coffee pot in hand, but Marcus waved her away without taking his eyes off Jake. The message was clear: this wasn't a social conversation.
"How did you find me?"
Jake asked. Marcus pulled out a smartphone and showed Jake the screen. It was a video from inside the Anchor Tavern, showing the entire confrontation with Vince and his friends. The quality was surprisingly good for a security camera. "Small towns love their surveillance," Marcus said, putting the phone away.
"Amazing what you can access with the right contacts and a little money."
Jake felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he hadn't experienced since leaving the military. His civilian life had been a carefully constructed attempt at anonymity, and now it was clear that anonymity was an illusion.
"What do you want?"
Jake asked.
Marcus leaned forward slightly. "I want to offer you a job. Real job, not the minimum wage garbage you've been applying for around here."
"I'm not interested in going back to that world," Jake said immediately. "That world never left you," Marcus replied.
"You proved that tonight. 3 civilians thought they could push around an ex-soldier, and you showed them what professional violence actually looks like." The words stung because they were true.
Jake had tried to convince himself that he could leave his training behind, that he could become just another regular person working a regular job. But the moment real violence entered his life, everything he'd learned as a SEAL had taken over automatically.
"Besides," Marcus continued, "what exactly are you going back to? I've seen your job applications. Auto mechanic, warehouse worker, security guard.
You're trying to squeeze a racehorse into a plowhorse harness."
Jake's jaw tightened.
"Those are honest jobs." "They're jobs for honest people who don't have your skills," Marcus agreed.
"But they're not jobs for you. When's the last time you felt like yourself? When's the last time you woke up excited about what you were going to do that day?"
The question hung in the air between them. Jake tried to remember the last time civilian life had felt natural, but came up empty. Every day since leaving the Navy had been an exercise in pretending to be someone he wasn't.
"Tell me about the job," Jake said finally.
Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile.
"Private security consultant. High-end clients, international operations.
The kind of work that requires someone with your specific skill set." "You mean mercenary work?" "I mean protecting people who can't rely on local law enforcement or government security services," Marcus corrected. "Rich businessmen operating in dangerous countries.
Politicians who've made powerful enemies.
Witnesses who need to disappear for a while." Jake had heard similar pitches before. Private military contractors were always recruiting former special operations personnel with promises of good money and interesting work. Most of them delivered on the money but conveniently forgot to mention the moral compromises involved.
"What makes you think I'm interested?"
Jake asked. Marcus pulled out a tablet and showed Jake a photograph. It was a middle-aged woman in an expensive business suit, standing next to a sleek private jet. She looked confident and successful, but there was something worried in her eyes.
"Sarah Chen," Marcus explained. "CEO of Chen Industries, one of the largest rare earth mineral companies in the world. 3 weeks ago, someone tried to kill her in Singapore." Jake studied the photograph. "Local crime?"
"Professional hit team," Marcus said.
"Very professional."
They killed her bodyguard and came within 30 seconds of completing their mission. She survived because her driver was former SAS and knew how to handle an ambush situation.
"Why is someone trying to kill her?"
Marcus swiped to another photo, this one showing a massive mining operation in what looked like African terrain. She's negotiating exclusive mining rights in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Lots of interested parties who would prefer she didn't succeed. Jake was starting to see where this was heading.
And she needs protection while she completes these negotiations. She needs protection, period, Marcus said. The attempt in Singapore was just the beginning. We have intelligence suggesting at least 2 more attempts are planned in the next month.
Why me specifically? Jake asked.
There are plenty of qualified people available for protection work.
Marcus swiped to a new screen showing Jake's military service record.
Seeing his classified information displayed on a civilian tablet made Jake's skin crawl. Navy SEAL for 8 years, Marcus read.
Multiple overseas deployments.
Specialized training in close protection, small unit tactics, and counter-terrorism operations.
Fluent in Spanish and Arabic.
No family ties or civilian commitments.
The last line hit Jake harder than he expected.
No family ties or civilian commitments. 8 years of military service had cost him his marriage, most of his friendships, and any chance of a normal relationship. Now his isolation was being used as a selling point for dangerous work.
More importantly, Marcus continued, you're someone I trust.
We worked together in Afghanistan, and I saw how you operate under pressure.
When things went bad in those mountains, you didn't hesitate and you didn't abandon anyone. Jake remembered that operation clearly.
Marcus and his team had been trapped for 18 hours, taking casualties and running low on supplies.
The extraction had required Jake's team to fight their way through enemy territory while carrying wounded men who couldn't walk.
This is different, Jake said.
That was military action against enemy combatants. This is civilian protection work.
Is it?
Marcus asked.
Someone is trying to murder an American citizen who's conducting legitimate business overseas.
How is protecting her different from any other mission you've completed? Jake didn't have a good answer for that question.
The moral lines that seemed clear in military service got blurry in civilian contexts. But the underlying principle, protecting people from those who wanted to hurt them, remained the same.
What kind of money are we talking about?
Jake asked. Marcus slid a folded paper across the table. Jake opened it and nearly choked on his coffee. The monthly salary was more than he'd made in a year as a SEAL, and the completion bonus was enough to buy a house outright.
Plus all expenses, full medical coverage, and life insurance, Marcus added. This isn't a fly-by-night operation, Jake.
We work with Fortune 500 companies and government agencies that can't use official channels.
Jake studied the contract terms. Everything looked legitimate and professional.
Too professional, which made him suspicious.
Who do you work for? He asked.
Cerberus Strategic Solutions, Marcus said.
Private security firm based in McLean, Virginia. We handle high-risk protection assignments that regular security companies can't manage.
Jake had heard of Cerberus. They had a reputation for effectiveness and discretion, but also for operating in legal gray areas that made regular law enforcement uncomfortable. Their clients included tech billionaires, oil executives, and politicians who needed protection from threats that couldn't be addressed through normal channels.
How long is the assignment?
Jake asked. 6 weeks minimum, possibly longer depending on how negotiations progress, Marcus said. Ms. Chen has business interests in several countries, and the threat level remains high until these mining deals are finalized.
6 weeks.
Long enough to make serious money, but not so long that Jake would lose touch with civilian life entirely. Assuming civilian life was something he actually wanted to maintain.
Where would we be operating?
Jake asked. Marcus swiped through several more photos on the tablet: luxury hotels in major cities, private airfields, corporate offices with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking impressive skylines. Initially, Hong Kong and Dubai, Marcus said.
Possibly South Africa and Belgium later.
Ms. Chen's business requires her to travel extensively, and the threats follow her wherever she goes. Jake had been to most of those places during his military service, but always as part of combat operations or intelligence-gathering missions.
The idea of visiting them as a civilian protection specialist was intriguing. "What's the team composition?" Jake asked.
"Small and mobile," Marcus said.
"For operators total, including yourself. Everyone has special operations background and experience in protection work. We've worked together before on similar assignments."
Jake appreciated the small team approach. Large security details were conspicuous and unwieldy. A four-man team of competent operators could provide effective protection while maintaining a low profile.
"I need time to think about it," Jake said finally. Marcus nodded and stood up. "I understand. But I need an answer by tomorrow night. Miss Chen's schedule doesn't wait for anyone's career crisis."
He dropped a business card on the table.
"Call me when you decide. And, Jake? Whatever you choose, be careful around here. Your little demonstration tonight is going to attract attention. Small-town tough guys have big city friends sometimes."
Marcus walked out of the diner without looking back, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts and a decision that could change everything. Jake sat in the empty booth for another hour, drinking bad coffee and watching the few remaining customers drift in and out. The contract offers sat on the table in front of him like a loaded weapon, dangerous, but potentially useful in the right hands. Outside, his motorcycle waited under the street lamp, ready to take him back to his small apartment and his collection of rejection letters. Or ready to take him somewhere else entirely.
For the first time in months, Jake felt like he had a real choice to make.
Not between different versions of the same unsatisfying civilian life, but between safety and purpose, between hiding from what he was and embracing it completely. The question was whether he had the courage to stop pretending he was something he wasn't. His phone buzzed with another text message, this one from an unknown number. "Saw what you did to Vince tonight.
Impressive. We should meet."
Jake stared at the screen, his instincts immediately alert. Two mysterious contacts in one night was more than coincidence. Someone else was taking an interest in his situation, and their intentions were unclear. He looked around the diner, noting the positions of other customers and staff, identifying potential threats and escape routes. The paranoia was back, stronger than ever, and with it came a familiar sense of clarity. His quiet civilian life was over whether he took Marcus's job or not. The only question now was whether he would face whatever came next as a prepared professional or as an unprepared victim. Jake finished his coffee, left money on the table, and walked out into the night. Tomorrow he would have to make a choice that would determine not just his career, but his entire future. Behind him, the diner continued its lonely vigil over the sleeping town, while somewhere in the darkness, people with unclear intentions made plans that would soon intersect with his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Jake didn't sleep that night. He sat on his apartment balcony, watching the empty streets and thinking about Marcus's offer while his instincts screamed that something was wrong. The timing was too convenient, the surveillance too sophisticated, and the money too good to be completely legitimate.
At dawn, his phone rang. Unknown number again. "Mr. Martinez?" The voice was female, professional, with a slight accent he couldn't identify. "My name is Elena Vasquez. I work for the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Jake's blood turned cold. "How did you get this number?" "We need to talk," Elena continued, ignoring his question. "There are some things about your situation that you need to understand before you make any career decisions." "What kind of things?" "The kind that could get you killed if you're not careful," she said. "Meet me at Miller's Diner on Route 9 in 1 hour. Come alone, and don't tell anyone about this conversation." The line went dead before Jake could respond. He stared at the phone, trying to process this new development. First Marcus with his lucrative job offer, now an FBI agent wanting to discuss his situation. Either his bar fight had attracted more attention than he'd realized, or there were larger forces at work. Jake showered, dressed, and checked his weapons cache before leaving the apartment. Years of training had taught him to be prepared for anything, and something about this morning felt dangerous. Miller's Diner was a 30-minute ride through countryside that looked peaceful but felt threatening. Jake parked his motorcycle where he could see it from inside the restaurant and
noted the positions of all other vehicles in the lot.
Elena Vasquez was waiting in a corner booth, nursing black coffee and reading what looked like a classified file folder.
She was younger than Jake had expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Her business suit was conservative and expensive, the kind worn by people who worked in government buildings with multiple layers of security.
"Mr. Martinez," she said as Jake sat down. "Thank you for coming. Let's see some identification," Jake said immediately.
Elena smiled and produced an FBI badge and photo ID. Everything looked authentic, but Jake had seen enough high-quality forgeries to know that appearances could be deceiving. "You're suspicious," she observed.
"Good. That might keep you alive. What's this about?" Jake asked.
Elena closed the file folder and leaned forward slightly.
"It's about Marcus Chen and Cerberus Strategic Solutions. It's about a job offer that isn't what it seems. And it's about the fact that you're being recruited for an operation that could result in your death or imprisonment."
Jake kept his expression neutral, but internally his alarm bells were ringing.
"I don't know what you're talking about."
"Marcus met with you at Denny's last night at 12:47 a.m., Elena said, consulting notes from her folder.
"He showed you surveillance footage of your altercation at the Anchor Tavern.
He offered you a contract with Cerberus Strategic Solutions to provide protection for Sarah Chen, CEO of Chen Industries."
The specific details made it clear that Elena had comprehensive intelligence about his movements. Either she was legitimate FBI, or she was working for an organization with similar capabilities. "Are you monitoring my phone calls?" Jake asked.
"We're monitoring Marcus," Elena replied. "You just happened to get caught in the surveillance net when he contacted you." She opened the file folder and showed Jake a photograph of Marcus, but this one was different from the professional headshot he'd expected. This was a mugshot, complete with booking numbers and arrest information. Marcus Chen, and yes, that's his real name, is wanted by the FBI for arms trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder, Elena explained.
Cerberus Strategic Solutions is a front organization for international criminal activities. Jake studied the photograph and arrest record.
The charges were serious, but something didn't add up.
"If you know who he is and where to find him, why haven't you arrested him?" "Because we're using him to build a case against a much larger criminal organization," Elena said.
"Marcus is small fish. We want the people he's working for." She showed Jake another set of photographs, these showing various men in expensive suits meeting in what looked like corporate boardrooms and luxury restaurants. "Chen Industries is legitimate," Elena continued, "but Sarah Chen has been unknowingly working with criminal organizations to secure mining rights in several African countries. The money she's paying for those rights is funding terrorism, human trafficking, and regional conflicts that have killed thousands of people." Jake felt sick. The woman Marcus had described as a successful businesswoman was apparently involved in activities that made his military missions look like humanitarian work.
"What does this have to do with me?" Jake asked.
"Marcus is recruiting you because they need someone with your specific skills for the next phase of their operation," Elena explained.
"It's not about protecting Sarah Chen.
It's about eliminating her business competitors and anyone who might interfere with their mining operations." She slid another photograph across the table. This one showed bodies scattered around what looked like a mining camp, with vehicles burning in the background. "This happened in the Democratic Republic of Congo 3 weeks ago," Elena said quietly. 47 people died, including women and children who lived in nearby villages. The attack was carried out by a private military unit hired by the same organization that's trying to recruit you. Jake stared at the photograph, feeling the same rage he'd experienced when seeing the aftermath of terrorist attacks overseas. "You're saying they want me to participate in mass murder?" "I'm saying they want you to help them control mining operations through systematic violence," Elena corrected. "The specific targets would depend on local circumstances, but, yes, civilian casualties would be inevitable." Jake pushed the photograph back across the table. "Then, they picked the wrong person. I've never killed anyone who didn't deserve it, and I'm not going to start now."
Elena nodded approvingly. That's exactly the response I was hoping for. Which brings me to my proposal.
She opened a new section of her file folder and showed Jake what looked like an official FBI consultant contract.
We want you to take Marcus's job, Elena said. Jake blinked in surprise. You want me to work for criminals? We want you to work for us while appearing to work for them, Elena explained.
You would be an undercover asset gathering intelligence about their operations and helping us build prosecution cases against everyone involved. Jake leaned back in his seat, trying to process this development.
You want me to be a spy? We want you to be yourself, Elena corrected.
A highly skilled protective specialist who happens to be reporting back to the FBI about everything he observes.
She pulled out another document showing the financial terms of the FBI consultant agreement.
The money wasn't as good as Marcus's offer, but it was still substantially better than anything Jake could make in legitimate civilian employment.
Why me?
Jake asked. You must have dozens of undercover agents available. None with your military background and specialized training, Elena replied. Marcus specifically requested you because of your reputation and capabilities.
We can't substitute someone else without raising suspicions. Jake studied the contract terms.
Everything looked standard for government consulting work, but the risks were significantly higher than normal FBI operations.
What kind of backup would I have? He asked. Limited, Elena admitted. This organization is sophisticated and paranoid. Too much government presence would compromise the operation before we gathered enough intelligence to prosecute anyone. So if things go wrong, I'm on my own.
If things go wrong, you extract yourself and we'll handle the aftermath, Elena said. But our intelligence suggests the risks are manageable for someone with your experience.
Jake wasn't convinced.
Intelligence was often wrong, especially when dealing with criminal organizations that specialized in deception and misdirection. How long would the assignment last? He asked. Minimum 6 months, possibly longer depending on how much evidence we can gather, Elena said. You would need to establish credibility with the organization and work your way into positions where you could observe their leadership. 6 months was a long time to maintain a false identity while working for people who killed anyone they suspected of betrayal. Jake had done similar work during his military service, but always with the full support of the United States government and significant backup resources.
I need time to think about this, Jake said. Elena checked her watch. Marcus is expecting your answer tonight. If you're going to work with us, you need to call him and accept his offer. Then, we'll establish communication protocols and operational guidelines.
She handed Jake a business card with only a phone number printed on it.
Call this number after you talk to Marcus. We'll arrange a more detailed briefing and get you the equipment you'll need. Elena stood up and gathered her files. One more thing, Mr. Martinez.
If you decide to walk away from both offers, you should leave town immediately. These people don't like loose ends, and you know too much for them to ignore you. She left money on the table for her coffee and walked out of the diner without looking back. Jake sat alone for several minutes, staring at the FBI business card and thinking about impossible choices.
Outside, Elena got into a black sedan with government license plates and drove away.
Jake watched her leave, then noticed another car pull out behind her with the same timing and direction. Either Elena was being followed, or she was part of a larger surveillance operation that was monitoring everyone involved in this situation. Jake's phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus, "Time's running out.
Need your answer by 6 p.m. today. Don't disappoint me."
Another message arrived immediately after, from a different number, "Saw you meeting with federal agents.
Very disappointed. Expect visitors tonight."
Jake's blood ran cold. Someone had been watching his meeting with Elena, and they weren't happy about it. Whoever sent that message knew where to find him and had enough resources to monitor FBI agents. He looked around the diner parking lot, noting every vehicle and trying to identify potential threats. Everything looked normal, but normal was often when attacks came. Jake paid his check and walked to his motorcycle, moving with the casual alertness that had kept him alive in hostile territory overseas. His apartment was 15 miles away, but he had no intention of going back there.
Someone who could monitor FBI meetings could certainly find his address.
As he started the motorcycle, Jake realized that his decision had been made for him. Whether he worked for Marcus, Elena, or neither one, his quiet civilian life was over. The only question now was whether he would face the coming storm as a prepared professional or as an unprepared target. The engine roared to life, and Jake pulled out of the parking lot heading away from town. Behind him, 2 different cars started their engines and began following at a discreet distance. The hunt was on, and Jake Martinez was both the hunter and the prey. His phone rang as he accelerated onto the highway.
Marcus's number.
"Time to choose sides, Jake," Marcus said when Jake answered.
"Are you with us, or do we have a problem?"
Jake looked in his mirrors at the cars following him and made a decision that would change everything.
"I'm in," he said. "When do we start?"
3 hours later, Jake sat in the passenger seat of a private jet climbing through 30,000 feet, watching the American countryside shrink below him. Everything had moved fast after his phone call with Marcus, too fast for comfort, but consistent with professional operations that left no time for second thoughts. Marcus had given him an address 40 miles outside town, where a black SUV waited with 2 other men Jake didn't recognize. They'd driven to a small airport where the jet was already fueled and ready for departure. No customs checks, no passenger manifests, no questions asked.
"First time working private sector?" asked the man sitting across from Jake.
He'd introduced himself only as Rodriguez, and his accent suggested military background with Latino heritage. His build and bearing screamed former special operations, probably Marine Force Recon or Army Rangers.
"First time doing anything since getting out," Jake replied honestly.
The third team member, a quiet man named Thompson with pale skin and calculating eyes, looked up from the tablet he'd been studying.
"Navy SEAL, right? Afghanistan and Iraq?" Jake nodded.
There was no point in denying his service record since Marcus clearly had access to classified information.
"I was Army Delta," Thompson said. "Did 3 rotations in the sandbox. Good to work with someone who understands professional standards."
The conversation felt forced, like these men were trying to establish camaraderie before revealing details about their actual mission. Jake had been through similar bonding exercises during military operations, but this felt different.
More calculated, less genuine. Marcus emerged from the cockpit and took the seat next to Jake. "We'll be landing in Miami in 4 hours," he said.
"From there, we fly commercial to Hong Kong."
"Sarah Chen is attending a mining conference that starts tomorrow morning."
He handed Jake a leather portfolio containing what looked like official documentation, passport, visa papers, medical records, and employment authorization for something called International Security Consultants. "Your cover identity is established and backstopped," Marcus explained. "As far as anyone knows, you're a former military contractor working for a legitimate security firm based in Delaware."
Jake examined the documents.
They looked authentic and professional, but the speed with which they'd been produced suggested resources beyond what most private companies possessed.
"What about weapons and equipment?" Jake asked.
Rodriguez opened a metal case under his seat and showed Jake an impressive array of concealed carry options: compact pistols, tactical knives, communication devices, and surveillance equipment.
"Local procurement in Hong Kong," Rodriguez explained. "Our clients have arrangements with suppliers who don't ask questions about import documentation." Thompson looked up from his tablet again.
"What's your experience with close protection work specifically?"
"Military VIP escort missions," Jake said. "Politicians, intelligence assets, high-value targets. Standard stuff." "This is different," Thompson said.
"Corporate protection involves different threats and different rules of engagement.
We can't just kill everyone who looks suspicious."
"Unless they're actually trying to kill our principal," Rodriguez added with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Marcus pulled out his own tablet and showed Jake a floor plan of what looked like a luxury hotel.
"The Mandarin Oriental in Hong Kong. Sarah Chen always stays in the penthouse suite when she's in the city.
Excellent security, but limited escape routes." Jake studied the layout, automatically identifying weak points and defensive positions.
What's the threat assessment?
Intelligence suggests a possible attempt during the conference, Marcus said. The same group responsible for the Singapore incident has resources in Hong Kong.
What kind of group are we talking about? Jake asked.
Marcus and Thompson exchanged glances before Marcus answered.
Competitors.
People who would benefit from Sarah Chen's mining negotiations failing.
The answer was deliberately vague, which made Jake suspicious.
In military operations, threat identification was always specific and detailed.
Vague descriptions usually meant someone was hiding important information.
I need more specifics if I'm going to do my job effectively, Jake said. You'll get full briefings once we're on the ground, Marcus promised. Operational security requires compartmentalized information sharing. Jake recognized the language of classified operations, but something about Marcus's tone suggested this was more about controlling information than protecting it.
His phone vibrated with a text message. Elena's number, safe travels. Remember our conversation.
Jake deleted the message immediately, but not before Thompson noticed him using his phone.
Personal business? Thompson asked casually.
Just letting my landlord know I'll be gone for a while, Jake lied smoothly. The flight to Miami passed quietly, with each team member reviewing different aspects of their mission planning. Jake used the time to study everything Marcus had given him about Sarah Chen and her business operations. On paper, she looked like exactly what Marcus had described, a successful businesswoman with international mining interests and legitimate reasons for needing professional protection. But Jake's conversation with Elena had planted seeds of doubt that grew stronger with each passing hour.
At Miami International Airport, they transferred to a commercial flight bound for Hong Kong.
First-class seats, no questions asked about their equipment cases, and boarding passes that had been waiting for them at the check-in counter. Your employer has good connections, Jake observed to Marcus as they settled in for the 15-hour flight. International business requires international resources, Marcus replied. Our clients pay well because they expect results. During the long flight, Jake had time to think about his situation. He was committed to working with Elena and the FBI, but he was also trapped on an airplane with 3 men who might kill him if they discovered his true loyalties. The isolation was complete, no backup, no escape routes, and no communication with his handlers until they reached Hong Kong. Somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, Jake realized that his military training had prepared him for many dangerous situations, but not for this particular combination of deception, isolation, and moral uncertainty.
Rodriguez leaned over from the seat next to him. Having second thoughts? Just thinking about operational planning, Jake said.
Good, Rodriguez said. Men who don't think get other men killed.
The comment felt like a test, but Jake wasn't sure what kind of answer Rodriguez was looking for.
He settled for a neutral response and went back to studying his mission materials. When they landed in Hong Kong, the humidity hit them like a physical wall. The city stretched out in all directions, a maze of skyscrapers and neon signs that looked like something from a science fiction movie. A driver was waiting for them outside customs, another man with the unmistakable bearing of former military. He led them to a black Mercedes sedan and drove through traffic that moved like organized chaos.
Hotel first, Marcus said, then, we meet with Sarah Chen at 1900 hours for mission briefing.
The Mandarin Oriental was everything Jake had expected from the floor plans, elegant, secure, and expensive. Their rooms were on the same floor as Sarah Chen's penthouse, positioned to provide overlapping fields of observation and response. Jake's room was luxurious but felt like a prison. The windows didn't open, the phone required special codes for outside calls, and he was certain that everything he said and did was being monitored.
At exactly 7 o'clock, Marcus knocked on his door. Time to meet our principal.
Sarah Chen was smaller than Jake had expected from her photographs, but she radiated the kind of quiet confidence that came from making life-or-death decisions on a regular basis. She was dressed in an expensive business suit and looked like she belonged in corporate boardrooms, not discussions about professional violence. Mr. Martinez, she said, shaking hands with a firm grip.
Marcus tells me you're former Navy SEAL.
Yes, ma'am, Jake replied. I appreciate military precision, she said.
This situation requires people who can think clearly under pressure.
She led them to a conference table where detailed maps and photographs were spread out like battle plans. 3 weeks ago in Singapore, someone tried to kill me, Sarah said matter-of-factly.
Professional team, sophisticated planning, excellent intelligence about my movements.
They failed because my driver was former British SAS and knew how to handle an ambush.
Jake studied the photographs from the Singapore incident.
The attack had been brutal and efficient, the kind of work done by people with serious training and unlimited resources.
Do we know who was responsible? Jake asked. Sarah exchanged glances with Marcus before answering.
We have suspicions but no proof. Several parties would benefit from my business negotiations failing.
What kind of negotiations? Jake asked. Mineral extraction rights in several African countries, Sarah said.
Very valuable resources, very complicated political situations. Jake was starting to see the larger picture, and it wasn't pretty. International mining operations in politically unstable regions usually involved corruption, violence, and human rights abuses.
Elena's warnings about criminal organizations were beginning to make sense. What's our specific mission here in Hong Kong? Jake asked. Marcus pulled out a schedule showing Sarah's activities for the next 3 days.
Mining conference at the convention center, private meetings with potential investors, and a reception at the Chinese consulate.
All high-profile events with limited security control, Thompson observed.
Which is why we're here, Marcus said.
Close protection, threat assessment, and emergency response if necessary. Jake studied the schedule and identified potential problem areas.
The convention center was too large to secure completely, the private meetings involved unknown participants, and the consulate reception would include people from dozens of different countries.
This is going to be challenging, Jake said. That's why they pay us well, Rodriguez replied with his characteristic humorless grin. Sarah Chen stood up and walked to the windows overlooking Hong Kong's harbor. Gentlemen, I want to be clear about something. My business operations are completely legal and legitimate.
But they involve working in countries where legal and legitimate don't always guarantee safety. She turned back to face them.
I'm not asking you to do anything except keep me alive while I do my job.
Whatever you might hear about my business or my associates, remember that I'm an American citizen conducting legal business overseas. The statement felt like a prepared speech, designed to establish plausible deniability rather than provide actual information. Jake filed it away with all the other details that didn't quite add up. Marcus handed each team member a communication device that looked like a standard smartphone but felt heavier than normal consumer electronics. Encrypted communications, GPS tracking, and emergency beacon functionality, Marcus explained. Stay in contact at all times, report anything suspicious, and remember that failure is not an option. Jake pocketed the device, knowing that it would also allow Marcus to monitor his location and communications.
Elena had warned him that this kind of operation would require careful management of information flow.
After the briefing, Jake returned to his room and tried to contact Elena using the business card she'd given him. The call went directly to voicemail without ringing. "This is Jake," he said after the tone. "I'm in Hong Kong and the operation is active.
Need to establish secure communications as soon as possible."
He hung up and sat on the bed, staring out at the city lights and thinking about impossible choices. Tomorrow he would begin walking a tightrope between criminal organizations, federal law enforcement, and his own moral code. Outside his window, Hong Kong hummed with activity that never stopped. Somewhere in that maze of lights and motion, people were making plans that could result in violence, death, or worse. Jake checked his weapons and communication equipment one more time, then tried to get some sleep. Tomorrow would test everything he'd learned as a Navy SEAL, but in ways his training had never anticipated. His last thought before falling asleep was a question that had no good answer. In a world where everyone was lying, how could he tell who deserved his loyalty?